Who knows? Yes, we're live, ladies and gentlemen, with the very, very first Reasonably Fine Art Talk. We'll see if anyone shows up for this. Oh, I guess I could be looking at it on my own device. I'm not going to during the actual broadcast, of course, because if I did, that'd be very rude. You guys would that'd be like looking at checking my email while attempting to carry on a conversation. Very first. There we go. We've got 6 people watching, one of whom is me. Hey, Susan Larkin and Toby Schwartzman. Dan's watching. Okay. So we're gonna kill a little bit of time until quarter of. We got a minute to go. Betty Sue was telling jokes over at her page the other day before she went live, and it was, why couldn't the Mellons get married? See if you know the answer to that one, ladies and gentlemen. See if you know. So, look at that. Aside from that, let's see. Oh, we're not gonna have Cats live today because Charbonneau has to go to the vet at 3:30, and so the prisoners have been stuck in the gulag all day. They're breaking rocks in the hot sun upstairs. What they're probably actually doing is lying absolutely flat up in the bedroom with the fan on them. That's my guess as to what they're doing. So anyway, it is 1:45 p.m. on Tuesday. Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. This is an experiment in, I've never done a art podcast, sort of, it's not a podcast, but an art thing before. But I thought it'd be interesting and fun to get together once a week for about 25 minutes, 20 minutes, and we'll talk about art. I'm going to have each week, I will sometimes, I was thinking we should do a crit session so that you guys who are watching, if you submit a photo of a painting of yours, we can I can put a few up each week and have a discussion about that. Going to talk to a couple of gallerists who I work with. Going to talk to my friends at Cobra, the water mixable oil company that I use. Probably talk to other artists. Probably talk to the cats, because the cats will doubtlessly want to help once we get to the point where they're out of their prison. But I wanted, at the beginning, to introduce the technical genius that makes this all possible, which is my friend Dan Richardson, who, there he is. There's Dan. Dan has been the sound guy. I first met him like 25 years ago at the Iron Horse in Northampton. And since 2008, I believe, or 2007, Dan has been the sound man on the Roots on the Rails music trains. If you all don't know about Roots on the Rails music trains, visit rootsontherails.com at some point. But anyway, Dan is down in Brattleboro, Vermont. I'm up here in Bellows Falls, Vermont. And we're going to go on a little adventure. Now, I'm in my house because I don't have very good internet over at my studio. But through the magic of the internets, we're going to look at what I've got up on the easel right now. And then there we are. And then, yes, this is how we'll go for the majority of the show this week. What I'd like people to do is please put comments down in Facebook, and I will answer them. You guys have conversations amongst yourselves in Facebook. After this is over, I will scroll and look at what people have written and reply. I would love your input about what you'd like to hear discussed here and stuff like that. This is the easel that I generally work on. And you'll see underneath the painting are color charts. These color charts are, if hopefully almost all of you are familiar with Richard Schmidt's book, Alla Prima. And the color charts are an important part of Alla Prima. Now, you all know that I tend to work pretty muted. So my color charts are just using the colors that the colors that my paintings are based around. That is burnt sienna or transparent oxide red, viridian, and ultramarine blue. There is yellow ochre also in there. When working plein air, I tend to work just using two colors of Cobra paint mixed together, which is the raw umber and the Van Dyke brown. That's just because it gives me a pretty universally usable kind of sepia tone. But in the studio, I skew things. I work with a lot more chroma, even though less chroma than most people. Why don't we go to the close-up of the painting now, Dan? So this is a painting that I've been working on that I believe is now finished, called Junction. It has had a long history, and I see I should have cropped it a little bit better, I guess, but because the top has the computer screen. But Junction is 20 by 60. I bought a box of 20 by 60 stretched linen canvases probably about 10 years ago. And I've had them sitting around. I've always been intimidated by how wide, just what a cinemascope kind of look it has to it. But once I started working on it, really fun to work with something so exaggerated in the horizontal. This is what I'm enjoying, what I enjoy doing in the studio, which is trying to push what I do to almost to ride right on that edge between depiction and abstraction. This is the subject matter of this, or the nominal subject matter, came out of just pushing paint around. A large part of this painting has been painted out and painted over again and painted out and painted over again. The whites in this are actually Kills primer, because it forms a bleed-through barrier over the oil paint. So this actually originally was upside down. What is the sky was the ground, and the ground is the sky. And then I thought it was working better compositionally the other way around. I've worked on this painting for about a year and 3 months, I think. There's some passages that are almost literally what I put down long ago. Over on the right, the far mountains, we're calling them mountains because even though it's just paint that suggests mountains, just for ease of dialogue. Those far mountains, that's from the original painting that I was working on a year ago, though the sky line is an artificial thing that I put in much later when I flipped it so that what was ground is now sky. I do use squeegee a fair amount in this painting. I use it for drawing the horizontals. There are also passages where I'm drawing the squeegee sideways, kind of the way Gerhard Richter does. If you've ever seen Gerhard Richter, there are a bunch of clips of him on YouTube that you can look up. One thing I'm thinking in the future, it'd be great if I have some sort of pointer device so I can point to the part of the canvas that I'm working on. But anyway, with this, what I was trying to do was keep it as abstract as I possibly could, while still having it read as a kind of enigmatic, literal landscape. For painters whose work I was thinking of when working on this, you can look at Stuart Shills, Eric Aho, and Doug Fryer. That's sort of my big three that I go with all the time. Okay, why don't we go on to the next one, Dan? No, Dan's gone off to get coffee, I guess. There we go. This is one I was working on a couple of months ago, and to my delight, someone saw it just when I was posting about it and purchased it sight unseen. They're picking it up late this summer. This is the place where my studio is the far right-hand corner of this painting. It's a complex of old paper mills in Bellows Falls, Vermont. A personal resonance for me is that in about 1970, my mom was working on it. We'd moved from Milford, New Hampshire to Wethersfield, Vermont. And my mom was working on a history of Milford, New Hampshire that she still needed to get finished, and was traveling to Milford a lot to continue working on that. She was homeschooling me at the time, which is, I can tell great stories about that sometime if you'd like. And we were getting into one of our usual arguments, because as a teenager living in I wasn't quite a teen, a near teenager, a budding teenager, living in a very isolated rural area with only the Bryn Mawr class of 1915 and my mom to fight with, I got pretty good at fighting with her. And so I think when we got to Bellows Falls, it was 20 miles from Wethersfield, with still 60 miles to go to Milford. I think it was by mutual agreement, my mother and I parted ways, and she left me in Bellows Falls for the day to fend for myself. And I wandered into the closed down Bellows Falls train station, where they still ran a switch engine out of Bellows Falls. There was still enough industry in town that there was a switch engine kind of shunting cars around all day. And by gum, the crew on duty asked if I wanted to ride in the cab. So I got to ride in the cab with the switch engine. And you'll note on this painting, there is the curve on the right-hand side, about a third of the way across, starting from the right, so 2/3 from the left. There is a kind of curving line. That is a remnant of the railroad track that used to serve the loading dock of the paper mill. The loading dock was directly underneath that gantry-way, the Danish gantry-way. So I actually rode on those tracks as a child. So that's part of the resonance of this complex of buildings to me. Another part of the resonance is just what happens to things of man when they are no longer needed. And the person who owns the complex has money, but he does not maintain these buildings, and the roofs are starting to give in. They will collapse. And I try to make a lot of what I think about in my painting is the eulogic. They're kind of eulogies to New England industry, the paper mills, the dairy farms, all this effort that went into industry that is now just wildering away. I was very happy with the color world of this. And this was trying to push into doing something, again, right, it's still depictive, but it is quite abstract. And I did this on, Doug Fryer suggested this, painting on a hollow core door. So I mounted muslin to a hollow core door, so it's 30 inches by 80 inches. Um, 3 coats of gesso, and then I used brayers, rollers that people use in monoprinting. All that passage over on the left, those really abstract buildings look just like I'm ripping off Matt Barber Kennedy. That's the brayer. And then I get much brushier from about the first third is almost entirely brayer, that very, very graphic area. And you can basically, that is delineated up to that tree trunk that fades into the light up toward the top. Then it gets very painterly for the rest of the painting. It's still maintaining a graphic thrust throughout, which is the white that comes in from the left and leads the eye way down into the far distance. That's the strong graphic element in this. And I break up the white. If I didn't break up the white where it gets into the puddles and stuff, as it gets toward under the gantry and stuff, I think it would be too strong. But by breaking it up, it still has continuity, but it's fractured enough that it works as a literal landscape item. I also want to point out, I'm very proud of, under the gantryway, you'll see we go a little bit purplish there. That is some, I don't know how you pronounce it, dioxazine purple. It is one of those cat in the hat colors that if you use it, it just takes over. It's like a phthalo. It's one of those chemical colors. So I use dioxazine purple, but sparingly, ladies and gentlemen, sparingly. Dan, why don't we go on to the next one? This is another 20 by 60. This is for the Buffalo Bill Art Show and Sale out in Cody, Wyoming. It takes place every September. They brought me in a few years ago because I believe they sort of figured the charismatic megafauna paintings, while still very, very popular, the audience for that is starting to age out a little bit, and they wanted to go a little bit more contemporary. So it's lovely to be in a world where I pass for contemporary. One thing I do want to point out here is that all the photos that I've supplied here are skewing a bit yellow. We're sort of losing richness in them. And that's something Dan and I will work on in coming weeks. It'll just mean that we adjust the photos probably a little bit more to the reddish. We'll have to find out, but we'll adjust the photos a little to get them a little truer. But anyway, this is in Bear Creek, Montana, which is about an hour from Cody. Cody, Wyoming is just one. I love Wyoming. They're all gun nuts out there. The Buffalo Bill Center for the West, it says the sign on the door, very nice lettering, very expensive, silk screened white letters on the door say no visible firearms. So concealed carry is okay at the Buffalo Bill Center for the West, but visible firearms you have to check at the desk. But anyway, at Cody is kind of the gateway to Yellowstone. But going a different direction, you go up to Red Lodge, Montana, and a painter friend of mine named John Potter lives up there. And John said, "Oh, you've got to see Red Lodge." And I took the spectacular drive. And on the way back from Red Lodge, it took a less spectacular, I mean, everything up there is spectacular, but a less voluptuous, less zaftig landscape, more sear. And came down through this coulee, and there was on my left, coming down this highway, there were these abandoned metal mine structures, and they had kind of a haunted quality to them. Sometimes you go past a place and just has this zing to it. And I pulled over and took bad photographs at the side of the road, and then I went about a quarter mile further, and there was a historical marker. I pulled over and read it. And this is the Smith Creek mine, where the worst mining disaster in Montana history took place in 1943. They were working, because of the war effort, they were working around the clock. And there was an explosion near the mouth of the mine, and it trapped 73 miners. Only a couple of them were killed by the explosion, but the explosion caused a rock fall, so they were trapped in there, and the miners knew that there were clouds of gas coming toward them, and they had time to write notes to loved ones. And I mean, they're heartbreaking notes. They're like a father and son are succumbing to the gas, and they're just writing to, to our wives and sisters, just know we had an easy death and we love you. I mean, just heartrending stuff. So it's definitely a haunted landscape. Now, getting over to where these buildings are, it's across a wash. There are barbed wire fences and no trespassing signs. And with my gimpy leg, well, besides being a coward, being a coward and having a gimpy leg, I just took my bad photographs and thought that was that. But then each year we're supposed to do a big piece for the Buffalo Bill Art Show in September in Cody, Wyoming. And I wanted to do, I really felt, one of the things I think is really important when we're doing art is do paintings that mean something. It doesn't have to be every painting that you do has to mean something, but part of our role is as storytellers of saying to people, hey, you gotta come here. You gotta see this. You gotta see this. And that's how I felt about this strange and haunted spot. So I went on to Flickr, which is something I'm doing a fair bit when I'm doing stuff for a remote show, and found photographs of someone who had gone down into where the structures are. And I contacted him and said, would it be okay with you if I, develop a painting from one of your photographs? And generally, I've found people to be thrilled with that. And so this man named Lawrence, he just goes by Lawrence, gave me permission. Any of these people, I also compensate them and give them a print, which I have to still do. Haven't done that yet for Lawrence. If you're watching, Lawrence, sorry, but it's coming. And develop this painting where, again, I really like very, very graphic storytelling. I think it's because I grew up as, in a print shop, and I like stuff that has a punch. I'm not a heavy paint user, and the white areas in this are the surface. It is the surface color. And virtually all the colors I use are transparent, except there is a bunch of unbleached titanium in the sky mixture here. But it's interesting to me looking at this reproduction, the sky color and the color of the metal siding on the side of the large metal structure on the right are read very similarly, though they are achieved by two very different processes. The sky, as I say, is a color mixture with a lot of unbleached titanium. The side of the building are transparent colors, almost dry brushed with a cheap chip brush, from the hardware store, the ones that shed constantly. This is a very worn chip brush, so almost dry brushed, multiple passes of colored glazes gives a very similar look. That's enough about that one. I could go on all day, ladies and gentlemen, but Dan, roll us to the next one. This is the other painting I did for the Buffalo Bill Art Show and Sale called Signal, Wyoming. And it, ladies and gentlemen, is a complete fiction. It's one I've had this canvas, I stretched it probably in about 2004. And I had some tentative painting on it that I did not like very much for a decade. And last year, after having taken Doug Fryer's Suggesting Landscape workshop at the Scottsdale Artist School, I was moved to, I mean, he's an incredible painter. And when you look at his paintings, you think he is doing literal depiction of a landscape. Then you see how he works. He's working with a trowel. And he's just kind of with the trowel. I was shocked. It felt like there was no Santa Claus. And so I figured I could go back to some of these paintings that I didn't like very much and build my own landscape. And so I kept basically the center band of this, which is now Far Hills, right? That is from the old painting. I took a lot of, Cobra makes what they call painting gel, which is basically colorless paint. It has the consistency of Vaseline, basically. So I did a lot of glazing with that. And then once that dried, I was just experimenting. I took white spray enamel, and that's what a lot of what looks like a snow squall in the background is. It's white spray enamel on top of a pre-existing painting. On the left-hand side, you'll see what read as trees and kind of a scrubby landscape in the background. So I got all that done. I was happy enough with it, but it didn't have, there wasn't any there, as Dorothy Parker said about Los Angeles. I put in what read as the utility poles, that is the verticals in the middle background, in the middle ground that go boom, 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 across. They still didn't add enough. So then I used a device that I learned from our friend Edward Hopper, who was not afraid to completely cut the viewer off from the rest of his compositions, which is something I always warn people against when I teach workshops, but I totally did here. I put in this set of railroad tracks in the foreground. He does it, if you know Hopper's painting House by a Railroad, that's that device. And again, using squeegee here to remove paint. The light on the top of the rails is a very, very dry squeegee pressed against wet paint, and it lifts that wet paint off and leaves that nice white line. That was better, but it still wasn't all the way there. So if you guys know Don, everybody knows Don Demers, right? Don Demers is a maritime painter. That's what he's best known for. And I heard him do an artist talk once where he said, I'll do a seascape, and if it doesn't sell, I'll get it back from the gallery, and I'll put the sailboat in, send it to another gallery. If it still doesn't sell, then I'll put the seagulls in, and if I get it back after that, I know it's time to put in the red buoy. This is the equivalent of my red buoys, ladies and gentlemen. It's to put in an old railroad signal. So I went to my friend Cade Smith, another photographer who I've met via Flickr. Never met Cade Smith in real life, but he's a railroad photographer. He's a great railroad photographer. And I did a painting called Semaphores Near Wagon Mound that is very much based on one of his photos. But I also use photographic references of his to make paintings of mine. So I asked him if he had any photos of USS signals, because these USS signals, it's a technology that is getting replaced. The new signals are called, colloquially, they're called Darth Vader signals, because they're kind of hooded and dark. They're not nearly as photogenic. But anyway, Cade got me this picture of this USS signal, and I stuck it in there using another Doug Fryer technique, another shocking technique, which is, as an old illustrator, they had no compunctions about tracing. Now, that guy can draw the hell out of anything, but he also can trace very, very well. So to make sure I got this signal correct, I blew the signal up to the right size. And this is, I think, it's a weird size. It's like 14 by 38 or something. So I have no idea why the painting is that size. It's just, I guess, the size of the stretchers that I had when I stretched it. But I blew the photograph up to the right size, put carbon paper, you all remember carbon paper, put carbon paper behind the photograph, traced it right onto the canvas, and then painted it in. And that was exactly the element that I think that painting needed. I mean, again, in reality, this painting is not as yellow as it's showing here, but compositionally, I'm really happy with it. Dan, next one. If you're falling asleep, I understand, Dan. Here we go. This is a plein air that I did on Friday, this past Friday, with my friends Laurie LaRue, who's one of the Putney painters, Shane Harris, who is he's a painter here in town. He is in the midst, ladies and gentlemen. He is in the midst of putting in his 10,000 hours. That guy is getting really, really good. And it's a joy because we can do socially distanced plein air painting. Laurie and Shane and me, and we were joined by Kyle Richardson. It was his idea. Kyle is the head of Royal Talons North America, for whom they manufacture Cobra. And Kyle is wonderful. He's a genuinely kind. Everybody at Royal Talons is really top-notch people. But he's kind, he's funny, and he looks like a giant leprechaun. And his children all look like smaller. He's got one child he calls the mini-me. But Kyle's is the best. So anyway, we were painting. Kyle was painting about 20 feet away from me. Laurie was about 40 feet away from me. And Shane was way up on the hill. We were at Scott Farm in Dummerston, Vermont. Now, Scott Farm, if any of you saw the movie The Cider House Rules, most of it, or much of it, was shot at Scott Farm. Other locations were the Mental Hospital in Northampton, Mass., the Bellows Falls train station, and the cider mill that I worked. The first place I had a job other than working for my dad was Augustus Aldrich's cider mill. And Augustus, I'll tell you a story. I don't want to go too long today, so I can't get into all my good Gus stories. But Gus was this little tiny man. He's about 85 years old. And my mother thought he was the biggest show-off because Gus would, like Boston Magazine and stuff, we're always doing stories on Gus and his cider jelly operation. And Gus, to show off, would shimmy at age 85, would shimmy up a tree and stand on his head at a crotchin at about 40 feet off the ground. My mother hated that. I think she was just jealous. But Gus, I've got so many great stories about Gus. He had false teeth that didn't fit. And so if you asked him a question, you'd ask the question, there'd be a few seconds of as he got his teeth in place, and then he'd answer. But anyway, this was at Scott Farm in Dummerston. This is a 12 by 24, which is the size I usually work when I'm doing a large. This is my large size for plein air, because I can do a pretty complete. I can tell the story I want to tell in a 2-hour period, which is about what you have before the light changes hugely. And this is the mixture of Van Dyke Brown and raw umber. You'll see on the left, it's a little bit more orange. That's evidence of more of the Van Dyke Brown. And it becomes more the color of chicken shit the more you go over to the right. That's more of just the raw umber. I use a lot of, one of the things I love about the water mixable oils is you can use these kind of watercolor techniques. So I'll do a lot of washes on the right-hand side. That's a lot of what, look at the barn structure near us, the far right-hand side. Look at the upper right. That shape is just a wash of paint, letting the paint be paint. The tree, if you move to the left, so between the white structure on the right and the white structure that is the nominal subject matter, there's a tree shape. That is using that same chip brush that I use for getting the side of the building in the Smith Creek mine painting. But loading it with a very watery mixture of paint and almost kind of slapping it on the canvas. But anyway, it's a pretty straightforward painting. We may visit this again another week, and I could A/B you pictures of the actual scene and how I edited that on the fly to create this painting. We go into a lot of discussion about editing and composition in my new video. And I guess, Dan, I can go big again now. And because now I got to put in the plug for my new video, which is officially being released on Friday, ladies and gentlemen. The official release date is Friday. But Streamline Art Video right now, if you go to Streamline Art Video, they've got, they're running some special. I can never remember how their specials work, but you can get it before it's actually released and save $20 or something. But in my video, we talk a lot about composing and how we build the story that we're telling, how we crystallize that in our minds. And I thank you. I'll stop yammering now. I thank you all so much for watching today. We'll be back next Tuesday at 1:45 p.m. Don't know yet whether we'll be what we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about something. As I say, if you feel like it, please comment, give me direction, and maybe we'll do a little crit session next week. I don't know. I'll be doing a big crit session at Plein Air Live, which is what Plein Air Magazine is. Their virtual plein air convention, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure they'll be flogging that. I'll be flogging it, so be on the lookout for that. But I'll be doing a crit session there. Maybe I won't do a crit session here until after that is done, so I don't step on anybody's toes. Maybe next week I'd have a gallerist. I don't know. Let me know what you'd like to see. But we're gonna end up today with the promo clip for the new video. So you get to see Charles in the field painting away with much shorter hair. So I'm kind of loving my incipient, slightly over the hill, moderately successful rock star look that I've got going now. You know, I wasn't the lead singer, obviously, but I was maybe the rhythm guitar player. That's my best guess. So the rhythm guitar player for a moderately successful rock and roll band says, thank you for watching. Thank you, Cleveland. And watch this video as we, it's a 60-second promo for my new video. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dan, and farewell.
Hi, I'm Charlie Hunter. In this video, we're going to discuss principles of design and composition and how those principles can help make stronger paintings. Composition is extraordinarily important in a painting. We're trying to convey a lot of information in what has to be a limited amount of time. It requires real concentration on the big shapes, what to emphasize, where to put the lights and darks. Doing a preliminary sketch is so useful. However, you have to have some idea of why you'd be doing the preliminary sketch. What is the painting about? How does the viewer move through the painting? If an artist can watch my video and walk away from it feeling like they have a sense of how to tell the story a little bit better and a little bit more clearly for their viewer, I'd be really happy.